little bit of competition. Jim talked about the solar system. I'm going to go galactic. So fasten your seatbelts. But something incredible just happened at the edge of the Milky Way. There is a yellow star. Around that yellow star, there is a small planet with a thin crust. It's a little bit like an M&M, the coating on the M&M. The planet is covered in a thin blanket of air. And for the last 4 billion years, it has been dominated by viruses. There are as many viruses on this little M&M as there are stars in our universe. If you line them all up, you're going to actually have the span, about 100,000 light years. It's the span of the Milky Way. And over the years, we've had other living forms, living things pop up and go. 99% of them are dead. It seems to be that extinction is the rule and survival is a bit of an exception on this little M&M. And the prognosis for these living things on this little planet is not very good. It's been going on for about 3.8 billion years, and it has about 1 billion years to go. In 1 billion years' time, the aging yellow star would expand, engulf the planet, sterilize it, and that's going to be the end of life. Except, and that's the breaking news, a cosmic instant ago, something special happened. We have a new life form that showed up on the scene. It is quite unlike all others that came before it. It can ask profound questions. It can write poetry. It can worry about oil price. And most importantly, it actually has the power to break the chain of terrestrial gravity and get life off Earth and into the solar system and out into the galaxy. Just in case you are in doubt, I am talking about humans. It's a very young species. I think lots of people are very unforgiving and very critical of the species, but it's a very, in the grand scheme of existence, the species is very, very young, has much to learn. And if you compare it to the life or the lifespan of a galaxy, we count it in billions of years. In our current form, we've only been around for a few thousand years. And yet we have an important mission, the outlines of which I think are becoming clear. Here's one way of dramatize it. It's from Marshall Savage, who thought we could colonize the galaxy in 8 easy steps. We're still working on it. Now is the watershed of cosmic history. Behind us yawn the chasms of the primordial past, when this universe was a dead and silent place. Before us rise the broad, sunlit uplands of a living cosmos. In the next few galactic seconds, the fate of the universe will be decided. Life, the ultimate experiment, will either explode into space and engulf the star clouds in a firestorm of children, trees, and butterfly wings, or life will fail, fizzle, and gutter out, leaving the universe shrouded forever in impenetrable blackness devoid of hope. I certainly know what we must do. If you're following the news, I think every time Stephen Hawking or Elon Musk are interviewed for any reason whatsoever, they would always bring the conversation back to the fact that we can't keep all eggs in one basket and that we need to make life multiplanetary. But they're only, current incarnation of people saying that in a long lineage. 2006, Michael Griffin, NASA administrator, we must go. 1994, Carl Sagan, probably doesn't need an introduction. Bottom line, we must go. 1976, Jared O'Neill, a brilliant American physicist, imagined habitats in space and all of that. Long-term survival of humanity, and we must go. 1961, Robert Heinlein, if you have sci-fi readers amongst you, brilliant sci-fi writer, same message. 1957, Hermann Orbith, brilliant physicist. The goal is very clear. We must go. 1929, we were already saying this. Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, a brilliant Russian rocket scientist. 1843, we're all the way back to American author. But basically, the bottom line of all of this is we've known we need to go for a while. And if maybe we can leave Henry Thoreau maybe where he is at that time, we didn't really have the practical physics to get going, but at about 100 years ago, you had 3 people seriously working on rocketry. You had Tsiolkovsky, you had Herman Orbit, and you had Goddard in the United States. So we had 100 years of, from the start of seriously, applying our engineering minds to this problem. So what have we done in 100 years? Technically, in 100 years, we have spent 123 man-years in space. That sounds pretty good. We have 500,000 people who have been to space. That also sounds very good. 6 people are currently living and working in space. That's not too bad, unless you start looking at where exactly we are in the grand scheme of existence. We've never made it to Mars. We had 18 people orbit the moon, 12 people walk on the surface. And basically, most of the people have not made it further than 450 kilometers, which is the distance between, roughly, the distance between Oslo and Stavanger, or London and Paris. And that's basically where we've been at for the last 43 years. The regret on our side is they used to say years ago, we're reading about you in science class. Now they say we're reading about you in history class. Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon. And that was in 1999. It's 2015. Things have not changed. So why so little progress? Well, space is hard. If you think about it, it's not very different from, like, the last time our kind has done it was when our ancestors crawled out of water and on land. Jim talked about how difficult it is to get off Earth, but once you're there, we don't exactly, we don't have air to breathe, we don't have berries to pick or cows to milk. We have to bring the entire biosphere with us in a closed-loop system, or we'd have to dramatically transform our bodies, probably a combination of both. So that makes it hard. It's expensive. The Apollo program in today's dollars is about $164 billion. The station that we have currently orbiting, the build and the maintenance is about 150. The heavy lift rocket that NASA is building today to take humans to Mars and other destinations one day is about $30 billion. So it's not cheap. But you'd think that if it was something as important, as significant as, securing the future of life and mind in our galaxy, we would, find the money. It turns out we don't really care about our own extinction or extinction of life that much. Human mind is a beautiful thing. However, it is prone to all sorts of cognitive bugs. One of them is availability bias. We're still around, we haven't gone extinct, and if it hasn't happened, that's not something top of mind. I always love this example of availability bias. If I haven't seen it, it's not relevant. The equivalent, in fact, it did happen to our species once, 70,000 years ago during the Tober supervolcanic eruption. We were down to 1,000 to 10,000 breeding pairs, so we were almost got wiped off the planet. Not many of us in this room today have pals, are pals with those guys. It's been a while, so of course this is just not top of mind. So if it's not, the threat of the extinction or the missionary appeal of taking life out into the system, what do we care about? What could we kind of hook on to make it happen? We do seem to care about prestige and military dominance. That's how we got to the moon in the first place. And space is a very, very, very handy application for such military passions. When you go up out of the atmosphere, it takes you 90 minutes to do a circle. So that is wonderful if you're planning to drop off unwanted packages on enemy territory, which is why we have now many treaties outlawing those kinds of engineering feats. This is a picture not of an actual missile, but it's a game, a Kerbal space program. Last year, we had 34,000 people submit a petition to the White House asking when we're going to build a Death Star. Here was the response. It's too expensive and not currently part of the policy to blow up other planets. So that's good. And in all seriousness, I think it it would be nice if we could deliver on the mission without having to tap into, the wilder side of the species. We care about science, although, unless we need the money for something else. So we do have these puppies on other planets, which is great news for mechanical life, not so great news for actual kittens and puppies. So science can get us so far, but so far no humans in the loop. We do care about doing more and more with less and less on Earth. So the obvious, hook for figuring out a path forward would be tapping into the profit motive or utility of space. A path, and I do believe that no matter what you think of the profit motive, a path that pays for itself would be the path that will get us there. And so enter commercial space. Where are we with commercial or new space at the moment? So we have 1,200 satellites up there. They're currently watching you, geopositioning you, taking pictures. It's great stuff. It's about a $200 billion market. Thank God for that. That fuels all the activity on the surface in terms of trying to reduce launch costs. And they're currently in this very nice little loop where, as Moore's law gets us, more powerful electronics, the birds get more powerful, there is more demand, more and more companies working on different ways of getting up out of the atmosphere. So it's all wonderful, and it's going to get us great stuff on top of what we already have today. We are going to get space internet. A few companies have tried that before. I think now with Elon Musk and Google and Branson, we'll probably stand a better chance of actually seeing it happen. We are all these wonderful things you see in spy movies where you have real-time, eyes on the planet also coming. You have several companies working on it right now with their swarms of birds. It's all wonderful. High-altitude joyrides, whether it's balloons or it's space planes, it's coming. The experience of gravity or the curvature of it's going to happen. Anywhere in under 4 hours, a little bit longer time horizon, but I'm sure it's also going to happen. All of this is wonderful, and it doesn't help with the mission very much. It helps with launch costs, but none of this calls for people in space, and none of this calls for us going beyond the geostationary orbit, which brings us back to the question of galactic significance. What creates value on Earth requires humans in the loop and pushes us beyond the geostationary orbit. This guy, not sure he's human, but we could use all the help we need. But in addition to Elon Musk, we also have a number of space-based business models that could do the job. And let me briefly talk you through them. So with space tourism, and I distinguish between space tourism and the joyrides, right? What I mean by space tourism is actually going up there, staying and living and, staying in space for a couple of days. So far we've had 6 people up at the station, staying anywhere between 6 and 11 days. That's great. We haven't had anyone for a couple of years now. But you can imagine that it could go into orbital hotels with hundreds of tourists going every day, which would force us to really crack the issues of human presence in space. That would be lovely. Microgravity research, I don't know if many people know this, but International Space Station is a lab with 6 technicians. And we do a lot of, what does space have that Earth doesn't? We have microgravity. And genes, materials, crystals tend to behave very differently in microgravity than they do on the surface of the planet. So many things become possible. I'm sure, I don't know if DSM does experiments yet, but I'm sure material sciences, you should be doing experiments there. And so today it's a very limited small space, but again, you can imagine orbital labs, pharma companies, agricultural companies, material companies doing research in space and coming up with novel properties that you can't figure out on the surface of the planet. Would require technicians on top of the 6 that we have today. Again, pushes us to figure out human presence in space in a more kind of more systematic way. Jim was talking about refueling stations. If we had those, just increases the degrees of freedom quite dramatically. that would be wonderful. Space mining, we have quite a few asteroid and moon mining companies now. They talk about trillion-dollar markets, which is true. Space-based solar power, we just covered that. Manufacturing in space. Today, the extent of our manufacturing in space is one 3D printer on the station that has produced a couple of parts, but you can, project forward and see, shipyards and, many things could be possible. If you listen to all of the individual companies representing these different business models, you would walk away with the idea that the market potential is infinite, which may be true. However, investor understanding and attention is finite, and we get into situations like this. Just in Davos last week, we had CEO of Planetary Resources. He bumps. I'm using this as an example because it's quite representative. He bumps into some journalist over, bar or a glass of wine. They start talking about asteroid mining, and this is the, excerpt from the piece that the journalist does on this. First of all, in the title, you have to assure people that asteroid mining is not a joke. So, first you need to get over the giggle factor. And then you could pretty much tell that Chris was disengaged from the conversation when, the obvious question is, show me the markets, who is going to be using all this asteroidal material. And I think, the problem is it's a long story to explain and probably not something you would do over wine at the bar. And the crux of the story is for all of the narratives of the different companies to be true, all of these companies need to be funded more or less at the same time, and I can explain why. With space-based solar power, we would need to manufacture it in space. So we would need the resources from the asteroids and the moon. For the fuel stations to enable all of this, we too need water from the moon. So you kind of start getting the picture that everything these individual companies are saying could be true, but all of us need to get going in order to make it so. So it's a little bit of one of these tricky problems that are difficult to explain over a glass of wine. Unfortunately, all of these different companies go to this very narrow pool of investors, and we all act as space cowboys because we're pushing our own narrative because we're the ones who want to get funded and not that guy next door. Of course, we should be doing more of this instead. So less space cowboys, more space musketeers. And that was the seed for an idea that we had initially incubated in Shackleton, which was, if we put our own perspective, our own story aside, could we do something at an ecosystem level that would enable all of us to materialize? So that was basically the big idea. And that was the beginning of the Transplanetary Space Development Company. I think maybe the closest analog to Transplanetary would be Innovation Norway. When you have an organization trying to advance a particular field or a domain in a country, we're trying to do that with a whole sector and a particular part of the sector. The premise is you can only solve there are many different individual ideas for different rockets or different lab stations or different technologies for inflatable hotels. I mean, we've got plenty. We've got that one covered, but we need to go meta and think, at the level of what can advance the ecosystem as a whole. So, and we can get very much more specific. How do you get the whole ecosystem investable? So, especially if you don't have, billions of dollars of your own money to plow into this, what could 3 people do? So for starters, we could just, learn to bloody explain this thing better. So our first, think big but start super small. So our first idea was to create, a visualization analytics platform for the sector, which just basically explains what it could be. So not only analytics that looks at the past, but analytic or predictions that and helping people imagine what could be. So for several months, while we're all busy with our main projects, we were puttering away, doing working on the report Space Economy 2050, and it's, it was kind of on a it would happen, but as time allowed. And then this happened. We had a close encounter of a third kind in a completely space unrelated forum, which just speaks to, go places that have nothing to do with you. It was a 21st century medicine forum. We ended up there more or less half accidentally, where we met these guys who were sponsoring the event. Deep Knowledge Ventures, it's a Hong Kong-based venture fund that made news last year because they were the first venture fund or the first company in the world to appoint an algorithm or an AI to the investment board. We got ourselves a lunch. Over lunch, we got the backstory, the way this happened. The venture fund was interested in the intersection of big data and biotech, longevity, regenerative medicine. And in order to make sense of the field, they themselves came up with an analytical system that relies on machine learning algorithms to figure out what was going on and what would be a good investment and what wouldn't. And it got so good, they decided to, as a vote of confidence, they appointed it to the board of directors. So over lunch, we conceived of a brother to Vital and named him Spock, totally accidentally. And that's where, what we were working on changed completely. Spock may be a machine, but it still takes about 9 months to gestate, I would say. It needs a lot of babysitting. It needs to learn the language, the space jargon. It needs to ingest lots of sources. It needs to learn, how to ask the right questions. So it's a lot of work. We have about, six more months to go. So it's an interesting process. As we were working, I think, and amassing a lot of information, our concept of what it is that we could be doing actually transformed and became bigger. Instead of focusing specifically on investors, we kind of started thinking of it as almost a shared mission control for humanity's expansion of this planet. And we started thinking of opening up all the information to, space enthusiasts and other participants in the industry and so on. So it would be highly available. A little bit to Ola's point of democratizing. So as a first step, we'd like to democratize all the visualizations, all the thinking, and all the data, and all of that. So what you'll be able to do is, as an investor, you'll be able to understand the ecosystem, see the projections, figure out, see recommendations, what makes sense to invest in. As an enthusiast, you could see the entire history of our space sector, but also see as far as 2112, which is the farthest known plan that we have of all the organizations. We have 100-year Starship and several other organizations working on Starship designs for, to be launched by that date. So you can see basically what's in the works. And many other, you could also figure out, if you wanted, if you're not in the space sector but you're an enthusiast, you could see all the opportunities for volunteering, potential job offers, crowdfunding opportunities, or basically a place to go if you are interested in space. July 2015 is the launch date. This is just one of the meta ideas that we have at Transplanetary. Briefly, two others would like to create. Once we've completed all of our data gathering and Spock teaching, we're planning to create a marketplace, basically a global marketplace for all space-related supply chain. Basically the entire thing. Think of it as Amazon marketplace, a third-party marketplace for space. Space Development Bank, maybe Space Development Fund. These ideas are still on the drawing board, and we're kind of 100% focusing right now on the mission control. And I'm sure they're going to change and evolve as we go ahead. So we will pivot, I have no doubt. Probably if 1 year from now I'm going to be here, we're going to be building jetpacks, I don't know. We're going to stay at a meta level, but we will not let go of the bone. And the bone is space settlement. Just to recap, the big idea for Transplanetary is to find a way or a path forward that pays for itself. The dreams that keep us going are the prospect of breaking the gravity chains of the planet, habitats in space, mining colonies or mining cities on the moon, wonderful cities on Mars. Maybe one day we're gonna, by 2040, why not have Olympics on Mars? That all would be wonderful. So that one day, hopefully during our lifetimes, that would be nice. If we get to a place where our identity shifts, so we don't think of ourselves as terrestrials, but more, coming from the solar system, that would be lovely. And if we succeed, going back to Savage, if because of us, landscape of radiation blasted waste will be miraculously transmuted, slag will become soil, grass will sprout, hopefully real one, not plastic ones like here. Flowers will bloom and forests will spring up in once sterile places. Ice, hard as iron, will melt and trickle into pools where starfish, anemones, and seashells dwell. The whole frozen universe will thaw and transmogrify from howling desolation to blossoming paradise. It's happening in the next few galactic minutes. In the end, the end game is to make sure that the little green M&M that we had there at the beginning does not become a one-off experiment, evolutionary dead end, but it becomes the beginning of something very interesting and exciting in the Milky Way galaxy.